Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Can high volume hiring achieve the trifecta of speed, cost, and quality? My name is James Witcombe. I'm a squad member here at ATC. When I'm not doing stuff for the ATC squad, I'm also a director at Smart Recruitment and founder of the Candidate Coach. I'd like to start off today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet on. For me, it's the Gunditjmara people down in southwest Victoria. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So today's topic, as we've heard there in the introduction, is all around high volume recruiting. It's obviously a big issue at the moment. We've had over 250 people register for today's session. So hopefully you learn some value hearing from some of the recruitment leaders across Australia on how they tackle their high volume hiring. Down the bottom of your screen, a couple of things. You will see both a chat little speech bubble and a Q&A speech bubble. So if you want to chat to someone, make comments throughout the session today, do so in the chat. If you'd like to put a question to the panelists, please do so in the Q&A. So questions to the panelists in the Q&A, we'll try to allow 5 to 10 minutes at the end for that. If you want to make comments throughout the presentation, pop those into the chat as well. So we have a wonderful panel today, and I would like to now ask our panelists to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of an overview on their volume hiring. So we're going to start off by saying good morning to Jenn Cowland from CommBank. Good morning, Jenn.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a glorious day. I'm dialing in from the beautiful Ku-ring-gai country just north of Sydney. Deeply grateful for the amazing bush that I'm surrounded by today, working from home flexibly. So I'm the strategy talent acquisition manager for all of the customer-facing roles in our group contact centres and our retail banking branches across Commonwealth Bank and Bankwest. In FY23, we hired over 3,000 high-volume colleagues from about 12,000 applications. 80% of those applicants are existing CommBank or Bankwest customers, so a very precious group of people.
Great, some big numbers there. Thanks for joining us today, Jenn. We look forward to hearing more from you. Let's cross over now to Alissa Patoulios from Optus. Good morning, Alissa.
Hello, how are you? So Alissa, Senior Director of Talent Acquisition at Optus. I have responsibility of all the hiring across Optus, whether it's in the contingent, experienced hire or higher volume space. We have a team of legends who look after the high volume recruiting at Optus, so I'm here flying the flag for them and telling their story. Do want to acknowledge the work that they have put in. Similarly to Jenn, we typically recruit for our retail and contact centres across Australia, so geographically dispersed recruitment. Although our contact centres, we do have the luxury of having a couple of core hubs that we recruit to, and that will come into play as we continue the conversation. So that's us.
Great, thanks, Alissa. And last but not least, I'd like to cross to Ian from Paradox to introduce himself and perhaps reiterate a little bit on the topic for today. Why do we need to streamline our high volume hiring?
Great, thanks, James. Look, hi everyone. Look, it's a privilege to be on the webinar with you all today. So look, in McCreery, I lead our solution consulting practice across APAC at Paradox, and recognize that Paradox is a relatively kind of new entrant in the Australian market. So I hope it's okay with you all. I just want to spend a couple of minutes sort of sharing our why, and our story and how that kind of relates to the subject today. And that's really around, can you have the trifecta? Can you have sort of, speed, cost, quality without compromising candidate experience? So I'll share my screen now, so bear with me. But it's a subject that, I'm incredibly passionate about, and it's one that I've kind of spent a large part of my career sort of focused on, and how you kind of innovate in this space. It's how you kind of balance people, technology, and process. And it's really kind of led me to, why I'm here today and kind of what's unique about Paradox. it's really built around like the premise of conversation. But one thing that's really key to me is that, recognizing that every hire, starts with hello, and it starts with a conversation. And, when Paradox was founded in sort of 2016, kind of conversational AI was really unheard of. When we sort of went out to speak with clients, it was a new concept. But if we fast forward to today, with the advent of generative AI and ChatGPT and Bard, it's really become this thing, this ethos as part of everyone that's trying to understand and how we can leverage that in, everything we do, whether that's in our corporate lives or own personal lives, as well. So I want to just take a moment to share a video with you to bring that to life and, what that can actually look like in terms of a high volume hiring environment. Right, awesome. Like for me, that's kind of really emotive and powerful, and personally love the confetti as well. I don't think there's enough confetti in our lives in enterprise technology, but I think it's sort of ultimately our mission here is around, implementing the next generational software that actually get recruiting teams back to kind of what they should be doing. And that's building relationships, it's talking with hiring managers, speaking with candidates, and it's getting them out of systems and software. And ultimately, we work with some of the world's most prolific talent brands, and, Alissa, pretty privileged that, Optus are here as well today, and it's across, almost every industry, imaginable, today. And now, as promised, I said I'll keep it short, so I'll transition back to James. But just as you can see here on the screen, it's quite a heavy slide, so we'll share this afterwards. But you can sort of see that kind of legacy way we think about high volume hiring on the left-hand side, through to on the right-hand side, where sort of Paradox, is thinking around it's augmenting recruiters, augmenting hiring, built around chat, SMS, and ultimately conversations.
Thank you, Ian. Certainly got me ready for my second coffee. That's for sure. A great video. Jenn, I'd like to come to you with the first question. You mentioned before 3,000 hires a year. That is big, high volume numbers for Australia. What are the unique challenges associated with high volume hiring at CommBank at the moment, especially when considering candidate expectations are pretty high in today's competitive job market?
Yeah, lots of pressure being first one out of the gate. So look, I think that the environment has evolved so significantly over the last 3 years. If I think back to what it was prior to COVID, look, quite frankly, it was about wading through volumes of applications, and friction within the recruitment process was actually somewhat intentional. It helped us get, the funnel smaller. Now, COVID resulted in a period of time where, applications really dried up. But most significantly, candidates were really in control, regardless of the role type. So yes, the market softened a little. We're still at record low unemployment, but in comparison to what we were, 24, 18 months ago, it's certainly, the balance seems to be a little bit better. But candidates still have a ton of choice, and they're really still moving very, very fast. And rightly so, they expect us to as well. So that legacy of that time, which we all plummeted into, is really here to stay. So friction in a process now means that candidates will just move to the next opportunity. You've got, to get to the best talent, volume recruitment now has to be really, really fast, and it has to be incredibly candidate focused. You've got to get to them really quickly, and you've got to make sure that what you're offering is really attractive and meets the needs of those candidates. And really importantly, it fits in with their lives. COVID changed the way we look at the world and where priorities stand and sit. So I think the expectation of candidates in any process, high volume or single hire, is exactly the same. They want to talk to a human as soon as possible. And they only want to invest time in roles that are going to be a really good fit for them and are going to fit in with their lifestyle as well. So, we talk about the golden trifecta of speed, cost, and quality. For a recruiter in the high volume space, it's really challenging because we simply cannot apply the same level of human touch as our single hire colleagues. And I can say that hand on heart, coming from a single hire background originally myself. In our case, where we're hiring upwards of 3,000 candidates a year, if we spent just 1 hour in a conversation with just the successful candidates, that would mean 58 hours of initial candidate conversations per week for the entire 52 weeks of the year for our recruitment team. And don't get me wrong, they are amazing. I love my legends as well, and certainly speaking on their behalf today, but that's just not possible, and certainly that's not cost effective, nor will it give the candidates what they need or our business what they need. So how do we give them individualized and personal experience and still meet that golden trifecta? We certainly haven't got it perfect, but for us right now, what is working is knowing exactly who our target market is. For us, we talk about that in terms of our hiring personas, knowing exactly who we're going for and why we're targeting those folks. And then once we know who those folks are, what do they want? What does the role have to look like for them? What locations are they interested in, both from a hybrid working perspective and geographically? What hours do they want to work? What kind of culture do they want? Are perks important? If so, what are they? And then how does our role design meet those requirements? So it's really that shift, instead of how does my role, how do you, candidate, fit into my role? No, how does my role fit into you, candidate? And if your role design isn't aligned to what your target market is looking for, what are you going to do about it? And that's a really big one that we all need to stop and consistently ask.
Very good. Thanks for that, Jen. That's a great insight. Alissa, what would you like to add in terms of the unique challenges that you're facing at Optus with volume hiring?
Look, I think we're all probably feeling and experiencing similar things. You've gone from an employer-led market to a candidate-led market, and potentially shifting back to an employer-led market. So I think, with that comes a whole variety of different challenges. I think, high volume recruitment is it's unique. It's a different skill set. It's often very process orientated. You're typically, obviously, talking about sort of large numbers of people, and it's really trying to strike that balance of making sure that your team are engaging at the right points to add value to the candidate, but also making sure that you've got enough steps in the process so that both you and the candidate can decide whether or not you want to select in or opt out. So it is a bit of a tricky balance. And of course, you know, Jen touched on it as well. It's really around that personalisation and making sure that you've got something that's right fit. And if it's not, being really authentic about, you know, the fact that you can offer something different. I had a chat with Jen offline, and it sounds like that CommBank have got, you know, a variety of different things that they can offer, which we don't have at Optus. We don't necessarily have our contact centre teams working from home, as an example. That's not an option for us. That's just not our business model. So being really authentic in the process and making sure that you're communicating so that, you know, you've got a lot of people that are coming to the door, hopefully. We have got a pretty good logo, and so, you know, from an attraction point of view, we certainly have, you know, good numbers of people that want to come and work with us, but it's really making sure that it, of course, in that scale, that it's the right job for the right people. Yeah. And I think similarly to probably Jen, we also had a conversation around high volume recruitment is challenging because, you know, you are wanting to give this personalized experience and being really respectful of the fact that it's time and effort, and we all know putting in an application is really daunting, but also being really respectful for the fact that most of these people are your customers as well. Yeah. And how do you provide an experience that is reflective of the consumer experience that your business is also trying to deliver outside of just the recruitment funnel? Yeah,
no, it's a good point, because for both of you, all of your candidates are either customers or potential customers. So
correct. Yeah.
There's that added layer there. And in your role, you obviously get to meet with lots of different high volume hirers. What would you say the top 2 or 3 universal challenges at the moment for getting that top talent in large numbers?
Yeah, like
sorry, you go. Yes.
No, I feel really privileged to get to work with many organisations across different industries, but also kind of wearing my old TA hat, you know, of leading teams, of, you know, volume teams onshore and offshore. It's given me, you know, perspective, lots of different perspectives, and I couldn't agree more with sort of Jen and Alissa. It's, you know, but speed around personalisation, getting your EVP out there has to be authentic. Like some of the other sort of pieces that I see is really around the ability to scale. Like high volume can be cyclical, it can be sort of, you know, opening new stores and restaurants. So it's the ability to be able to kind of resource to meet those can be challenging. And also sometimes TA, you know, is not seen as a revenue driver for the business. It's seen as a cost center, you know, and that's, you know, you look at brands like, you know, CBA or CommBank, you know, Optus, you know, absolutely correct in saying, you know, your candidates are also your customers, you know, and you don't want that experience to be detrimental to your consumer brand at large. The other piece is I've seen kind of, you know, more traditionally pre-COVID, that high volume hiring was kind of undervalued by organizations. Maybe it's a bit of a call, and feel free to disagree with me in the chat here, but, you know, I think COVID gave us an opportunity and a seat at the table where organizations started to see us as, you know, the value that high volume hiring brings. You know, when we saw the impact of, you know, stores closed and restaurants not being able to open, you know, that hits your brand, but, you know, also your bottom line as well. So, and the other piece, just kind of building on kind of what Alissa said around that consumer brand piece and candidate expectations. You know, there is an expectation in every part of our life today that it's, you know, we can engage, you know, whether it's in a career conversation or buying, you know, some new clothes on, you know, an online brand, which I won't name, that I do quite a lot, but it's around being able to engage in that, you know, anytime, anywhere, you know, through your mobile device. And it's kind of that instant gratification, and that transcends into hiring as much as any other part of our life today.
Thanks, Ian. Jen, take me through the candidate application process at CommBank. If I was to jump onto Seek today, send through an application, let's say for a contact center role, what's my journey going to be like as the candidate?
Yeah, so we're definitely in a mix of traditional and innovative ways of working. One of our more traditional processes is our application process. So it would probably be something you'd be pretty familiar with. So jump on and you apply and fill out, you know, a multi-question application form. If you pass the eligibility criteria on that application form, which is really about right to work, for our high volume recruitment, you then get invited to complete an online assessment. If you pass that online assessment, then you are offered the opportunity to complete a digital interview. Assuming that you choose to do so and are successful in passing, you will then have the opportunity to talk to a talent acquisition partner who will go into more of a deep dive conversation around your situation and needs and role fits. And if both agree that that's a good fit moving forward, we generally move to an assessment centre. We were doing a lot of them online, but we are moving back to face-to-face. We're finding the candidates are driving that move. And if successful at the assessment centre, then offers and background checks.
Yeah. What's the digital interview involve? Is it a recorded video response or?
Yeah, so it's the opportunity for a candidate to answer 5 questions based on our core values and customer commitments about how they would respond to those questions. So it's a bit for us to get an opportunity to hear how they respond, but also for the candidates to practice responding to the interview. You know, we're very open-minded about those responses. They're really, when they're completed, they're a really great way for us to have a look at potential candidate fit and also for the candidates to see what we're looking for. Yeah.
So it sounds like a good blend of the old and the new there, Jen. Part of today's topic is speed. How long does the process normally take?
It can take a couple of weeks to get from application to talking to a talent acquisition partner. We are actively reviewing this process at the moment. That to us is not acceptable, and we need to get it to a much shorter time frame. One thing that we have been able to do to shorten the process to date, which is unique, which I haven't mentioned yet, is that our talent acquisition partners for our largest contact centre actually direct appoint the candidates that are hired into that business. So there is no involvement by our hiring managers in any of those stages that I mentioned previously for the majority of our hires. They get to know the candidates post day one. We do have an amazing induction team who do reach out with candidates because we know that that human connection is really important. So they have a social connection between, you know, when offers are made and start date, but TA really run and own that process.
Yeah, great.
It was even longer before then.
Thank you, Jen. Alissa, let's pretend we're doing the same at Optus.
Sure.
How does your application process differ for candidates?
Well, pleasingly to say, it's a bit faster and a bit more candidate friendly. So obviously, being a telco, we want to make sure that our application process is completely mobile friendly. We're in a state of, we've kind of re-engineered our recruitment process. So I think different evolutions for Jen and I. But we used to have a 50% drop-off rate of candidates starting application to actually landing in our SuccessFactors system. And we've implemented Paradox, so little plug there, and it's been live just for a couple of weeks now, but we've already seen a increase in number of applications coming into the system because we've actually put in place a quick apply option. So for us, the application form is a bit it's a bit archaic, you know, the old resume. We're not really interested in actually seeing resumes. We similarly just looking for a couple of eligibility questions to make sure that, you know, we're speaking to the right people that are able to perform the work. So we have a quick apply function through our chatbot, which is called CareerMate. It's new. We've just done a soft launch internally, but again, so far we're seeing some really great results from that. We actually have SuccessFactors, and unfortunately, the way that SuccessFactors is built in Optus, it is built in a group format. So we have 3 businesses or 3 entities working off the one ATS or one HR system, which I'm sure plenty of the folks listening in have similar challenges. What it means is that if we want to customize parts of our process, it's like moving the Titanic. We've got to do everything on group consensus. So what we've been able to do is actually utilize Paradox to create some customized workflows. And one of those workflows is our high volume process. So what what we actually have now is a quick apply function. The eligibility criteria moves you to the next step in status. We equally use a digital platform. We use HireView. We have broken down HireView. It historically used to be 40 minutes. We now have it sort of under 20 minutes. And again, part of that is a bit of a sell around the Optus branding and being able to communicate, because obviously having a branded experience is really important to us, and we didn't have it. And then basically we've used Paradox to be able to leverage, it reads the HireView assessment results. So now we can automatically progress candidates through to a interview with a talent acquisition partner based on, and the way that we've built it is anyone that achieves, say, in that top tier rating gets an automatic interview. So for the recruiter, what it means is that the touch point really is at the point of knowing that the candidate is qualified and has some of the attributes that we're looking for. And we're typically seeing that from the time of application to speaking to a talent partner, depending on the candidate availability, they can be speaking to someone within 24 hours. Because the interview scheduling function and the way that we've built the automation in the system means that once you complete one gate or hurdle, you can move straight through. And part of that was the design. Of course, we're here talking about the trifecta of speed, quality, and cost. And the reality is we've got a pretty lean team in the high volume space. And it's really trying to make sure that our touch point and communication with the candidate is at the right point. And of course, at that point, that's when we want to do a little bit of a sell and a pitch and make sure that we are not just getting the candidate to tell us why they need to work here. We get the opportunity to sell to them around why Optus is a brilliant place to be. From there, we can then also utilize Paradox. So once the talent acquisition partners had a conversation, we then utilize Paradox to schedule the next step in status. Bit different. We have assessment centers for our contact centers, and we have store manager interviews based on the retail space. So again, very different model to CBA, where what was really important for us as we re-engineered our recruitment process was the buy-in of the business and getting them engaged in the process. But we've historically taken, 2 to 3 days to book a candidate in for interview. So once they've spoken to the recruiter, then we're juggling, the diaries and the candidate availability. We've sort of seen our fastest interview scheduled to date from a TA partner pushing it out to the candidate to say, listen, we'd love you to meet with our business, is 15 seconds.
Wow.
So we've certainly seen some pretty significant uplift in the way that we've been able to speed through the process. But of course, making sure that we've got the right hurdles in place. So for us, the application process from start to finish, to get an offer, depending on everyone's availability, of course, is somewhere between 3 to 5 days now.
Okay, that's fantastic. And what was it, say, 6 months ago?
Similar, could be weeks. Honestly, to schedule a candidate could take us 2 to 3 days. By the time we check calendars and check locations and who's available and whatnot. So yeah, it was quite lengthy. Different for the contact center space, of course, because typically you're recruiting to like an event schedule. So you might have your scheduled assessments center days, and that's a bit of a different model. But again, being able to have an application live through to a pre-qualification and booked into assessment center is only a couple of days now.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We are talking here about, it's a bit of a nirvana state, isn't it? Speed, cost, and quality. It sounds pretty ambitious getting them all together. Jen, how do you prioritize the balance of these three in your hiring strategy? Again, whilst ensuring, that we maintain a candidate experience that is as good as possible.
Yeah, look, it's an ongoing exercise. And when Alissa and I were talking offline prior to this, it's one of the hardest things, right? We don't live in a constant utopia state where we can always get it right. But for me, and what we've really learned over the last 3 years is that the focus has to be for our business and our candidates on balance versus prioritization. In hiring so many candidates in such an incredibly competitive market, and having those candidates directly impact the experience that our customers have, ensuring that they have a great experience and also making it fast and cost effective are really important, and no one can supersede the other. For us, the worst thing, and look, we did do this, I think, unintentionally, and learned very quickly that it wasn't good, was to go so fast that you find, the best candidates in the cheapest possible way, only to have them say, nah, thanks, but no thanks, because they didn't have a great candidate experience.
Yeah.
So not only do we lose them as a colleague, but we also risk a high risk of losing them as a customer. And given the demographics of most of these candidates that we're working with, this is like really important life stage stuff for us. So yeah, absolutely not much fun. So the balance, it's really tricky when you get hit with unexpected intakes or customers' needs change. So everyone will be really aware of, if I could say, if I could see you all and say, everybody raise your hand who's had their credit card compromised in the last 12 to 18 months. All of those calls come through to our contact centres, right? And it's a really difficult time for customers. People have lost a lot of money, and it's a very anxiety based conversation to have. So, we need more people on the phones when those scams and frauds hit, and natural disasters, etc. So yes, we can try our very best to get that balance right, and then all of a sudden you get a massive peak and it's not quite right because we have to move with such speed. And I think anyone who went through COVID knows that speed did unintentionally trump quality at times. And we don't always get it right, but we just need to make sure we keep that candidate experience front and centre. What's helped us to stay balanced as possible is that we've got a really solid model in place for the recruitment for our largest contact centre, and it's not everywhere, we're evolving it, but there's 3 key things that seem to have worked well for us. And as I mentioned before, that's one, really leading with those solid understanding of the hiring personas and making sure that those personas are based on data and research so that you really know what great looks like. That is absolutely imperative with our direct appointment process. We wouldn't have the trust of the business, nor would we be able to have the great success we've had in reducing attrition recently if we didn't have a clear understanding between the 2 parties around what an excellent hire looks like. The second thing is hiring forecasts. In my role, I'm also responsible for doing our demand planning and forecasts for what the teams need to hire. It is not perfect, but getting some level of visibility and trying to understand your peaks and valleys so that you can appropriately support is really important. And the third thing we've been able to do is we have a talent pool of proactively engaged and background checked, which for us is critical. Being in financial services, background checks are huge. Customer service candidates ready to go. So having those 3 things in place has allowed us to have a model that's delivering great quality candidates faster than we could have ever imagined. We took what was an 8-week process and we've reduced it to about a week for the business. And we've complemented that with a university partnership as well. We've got a proud relationship with the University of Wollongong, which is going really well. The next iteration of that model is to make sure that we ensure that the candidate experience delivers as much or even more than the business experience as it relates to speed and quality. What's super cool is that we were able to do all of the above with no impact to our cost model. So we got fast, high quality, and it's cost us no more. In fact, it's actually saved money for our business in terms of a faster speed to answer calls, more people on the seats when needed. We've got lower attrition and our customer NPS has grown.
Jen, can I just ask you, my ears really pricked up when you said you've got a pool of customer service candidates who have already been background checked. How do you convince them to go through that process to stay in the pool of not yet successful candidates?
Yeah, look, it's we have an amazing team that does the recruitment. So firstly and foremostly, a group of individuals that are really focused on giving candidates fast no's, which is really important. I think Alyssa's talked about it before, like you've got to be able to say to someone, no, this isn't right, and really, really quickly. certainly something that, you know, through increasing the focus on our processes allowing us to do, but we've got a lot more to go there. The other piece is because we've got the forecasts, we know. So if we're going to Sydney as an example, and we're looking for candidates who want to work most of their time from home, but need to be able to come into the office once a fortnight, they have a hub date, they still need to be geographically located near an office. So let's say we've got a Sydney intake coming up in November. We know how many people we need for that intake. Yep. Although we are proactively background checking those candidates, we've still got a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like a piece of string without an end on it. We can say, we are talking to you right now, and our intention is that it will be this that we will offer you at this point in time. We want to make sure that we're ready to go. If something becomes available sooner, which it most certainly has since the model has been in place, if you are proactively background checked, we can flip you into that even sooner than anticipated. So it's about just being really honest with them.
Yeah, you've sold me. It's very, very, very well put. So I can see how you're getting people into the pool.
Want a job? No.
Ian, I'd be keen to hear from you. Again, you get to meet with lots of high volume hirers. When we're assessing speed, cost and quality, what are some of the mistakes, I guess, that talent teams make when they're trying to achieve all three at the same time?
To be honest, I think recognizing it as a big question, right? It's hard. And, you know, as you say, I'm fortunate to work with many clients, and, you know, it's really around actually trying to understand the problem they're trying to solve. You know, what is that problem statement? You know, some organizations have done a huge amount of research, both internally and externally, and kind of come with a kind of a clearer picture around what that is. You know, other organizations we work with are maybe still trying to uncover that and unpick that a little bit. And I can kind of empathize with organizations. There's so much, you know, technology out there today. You know, it can be really hard to kind of see what, you know, is out there versus the problem that you're trying to solve. But, you know, for me, technology, it's a kind of a really exciting time to sort of be here today. You know, there's been so much advancement over the last sort of 2, 3, 5 years. And I think sort of one of the call outs, if you haven't kind of looked at your tech stack in the last sort of 3 to 5 years, it's probably a good opportunity to do that. You know, there's probably a lot of opportunity for you to explore out there, obviously dependent, you know, on what the problem is and how you need to sort of, you know, add value essentially back to the organization and deliver to your stakeholders and customers. One of the other things is really around calling out sort of, I suppose, 4 themes. One is around sort of speed. It's essentially there to drive revenue. You know, if you think about it, one from, you know, Alissa, around driving, you know, best practice we're seeing around getting a candidate apply and actually having an interview or a conversation with your business within 48 hours. And, you know, essentially we see that the speed wins in a competitive market. So really actually kind of as an organization, reviewing your processes, you know, challenging those, not just trying to kind of automate your kind of as is process. But the other one is, you know, looking at conversion, and, you know, it really does drive savings. It kind of starts ticking off some of that kind of cost box, you know, that's part of this conversation. So it's really not only if you're converting quickly that it reduces your advertising spend, because you don't need to be out in market for so long or so often. You know, you also get sort of candidates, you know, you pick up the choice of them as well, because essentially they're engaged, you know, and it's front of mind for them. Automation, you know, look at it, you know, I suppose AI has just been so prevalent in everything that we do nowadays. It seems it's kind of mentioned in every conversation, but, you know, it is key to driving productivity. You know, it allows teams to focus on kind of what they do best and actually focus on high value added tasks. But again, you know, automate the right things and automate at the right level, and, you know, look at your roles, and, you know, the level of automation that you have for one role is not going to be right for the next. And it varies on organizations. So maybe unpicking automation as a blanket statement across all of your roles in organization, but it varies even down to the point of different types of roles within customer facing positions, or retail roles, or call center positions, you know, or, you know, skilled positions such as in healthcare, like nursing. That approach really differs.
Yeah.
But technology today is at a point where, you know, from my view, we don't need to have those compromises like we had to in the past around, you know, speed and quality, you know, and cost. We can still deliver that great experience.
Thank you, Ian. I just want to note some really good questions coming through. So keep popping those in. I'm going to try and wrap up the panel and allow 10 minutes to get through these questions. Alissa, following on from what Ian said then, tech stack, you've mentioned a little bit about some of the products you're using. Can you give us a quick overview again? But what I'm more interested in is, how do you actually measure the impact? How did you measure the impact? You mentioned before you first, had an interview booked in 15 seconds, but you're kind of at the start of a new journey with using some new tech. What are kind of the goals that you've put in place?
And I think it's always good to be really clear on the problem that you're trying to solve. And if we have a look at where we started, there's a couple of things. Our drop-off rate from application to completed application, as I said, was about 50%. Our cost of advertising, now, albeit it was a very different market, and there's, the external economic factors coming into play, but our advertising spend significantly increased. So we were spending more money to get more people through the funnel for only 50% of them to convert. Our NPS wasn't great, and we're an organisation, Optus the tagline is to, we want to be Australia's most loved everyday brand with lasting customer relationships. And I could not guarantee that was the recruitment experience that people, there was no similarities to our vision and what people were experiencing through the recruitment process. And that was reflected in our NPS, wasn't great. Our candidate NPS nor our hiring manager NPS. And I guess similarly, we did see a spike in turnover, and there's a whole variety of things. There was more jobs available and whatnot, but the reality is that we weren't sure if we were really picking the right people for the roles. And we really wanted to see a couple of things. The team were really focused on making sure that we had great quality candidates assessed for day one. We wanted to see sales performance the minute they went live on the contact centre floor. So the team did a really good job of being really clear on the problem statement, and then working sort of through that process around how are we going to address that. And technology was certainly part and parcel of that. And, again, Optus has a really strong view of, we really don't want to be an old school telco. We are an organisation, we're a tech-based business. So we really wanted to infuse our process with some technology that gave people an experience, got them excited, gave them some really great branding, let them speak at the right points, that whole personalised process. And so, look, to be honest, Paradox and utilising Paradox was some work that was already done prior to me joining. I've been at Optus for 12 months, but really the case study was, we have this success factor system, it's not going anywhere and it's not agile. So how do we bring in some technology? And I guess the tech solution at Optus is, we have one piece of generic sort of technology, and then we utilize bolt-ons to create our tech stack, so that we've got something where we've got the skills and the niche sort of technology to deliver what we're after. So for us, as I said, the tech stack came into play, and for us, from a Paradox perspective, it was really, we needed to address the application drop-off. We needed to get people through the funnel faster. We needed to make sure that when we were speaking to them, it was at the right touch points. We utilise HireView as well. I mentioned that we worked with the HireView team and completely blew that up, and said, you know what, why are we making people go through 45 minutes at the front end? Actually, we only need to ask a couple of key questions and test some of the core competencies here. Let's break that up and actually drive things like gamification and use of technology in our assessment centre process. So when you come into the assessment centre, you get face-to-face, you get gamification, you get, the opportunity for a real-time walking tour, for example. So it was all about creating those experiences, but looking at technology that we had and technology that we needed to be able to deliver on those, key problem statements. So that's kind of where we came in. Of course, James, plug for Candidate Coach. We utilise Candidate Coach, but again, because Success Factors is so static, we only had the opportunity of saying to somebody, hey, prepare for your interview and with Optus at really silly times in the recruitment process. And so we're like, how can we solve for that? How can we give our candidates the tools and the experiences at each step in status, not when it's irrelevant? And so again, we've been able to utilize our Paradox solution to be able to push out, hey, look at Candidate Coach, you're going for a video interview, here's some tools on preparing for the video assessment, or here's how to prepare for a live conversation. So it was really about going, here's our problem, what's our euphoric state, what have we got now, what can we combust, and then what can we add? And I think the team's done a really good job of blending all of that, keeping some of those key principles in mind. Right. And, you know, pleasing to say our application stats are through the roof. Our turnaround time is great. Our NPS has gone up by 30%, even with the introduction of AI. And, you know, there is always that concern of, is AI actually going to pull back the experience or not? You know, it's early days, sure. And I think what's really important is that you're measuring each step in status and keep your eye on what is and isn't working. But we've got good retention, and we were just so stoked with our sales team who reported back to the talent partners that they'd not really had people in day one start converting sales when they hit the floor, and they were. So, you know, there's all of those different checkpoints. And, you know, I think as we sit here and talk, and Jen's probably the same, it's not just about the process, it's always around the holistic piece. It's around the candidate and the process and the business and the commercials and the branding. Like, we've got a tricky job, you know, so to meet all of those criteria. So, and, you know, well, we never do it perfect, but I think certainly being able to leverage what's out there and think creatively is key.
Yeah. Ian, as a follow-up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You're at the cutting edge of AI. For recruitment, you know, what role do you think it's going to play in automation within the recruitment process? And I guess, are you seeing further advancements overseas than you are in Australia?
Yeah, like again, a huge question, and you can look at this through so many different lenses. And I think the way the sort of technology, you look at kind of technology, and I can share with the audience kind of some graphs around where we sort of see kind of different components of, you know, AI, kind of, you know, the advancement of technology. Some of those around language comprehension, for instance, have almost kind of gone like that hockey stick, almost vertical. And it's what it's enabled is that you can use technology in a really personalized and conversational way, which, you know, dial back even a couple of years ago, you just weren't able to do that with technology. So you can now kind of deliver that automation, you know, and experience, you know, together. In terms of some of the stuff, you know, data, you know, what we're seeing from the US around best practice, there's a couple of things. One, we're looking at organizations are having again, look at their tech stack and going, okay, what's right? Are we looking for a vendor that's going to overlay our existing, you know, system, you know, whether that's Workday or SuccessFactors, or are they looking to actually kind of split out their tech stack to have a dedicated, you know, ATS for corporate versus, you know, an ATS that's built for high volume hiring. So we've seen a bit of a trend of that happening in the US as well, around sort of breaking up the tech stack, which is really interesting, given you look at the trend for the last 10, 12 years, it's really been kind of consolidating all of HR tech into these kind of big HRIS systems. But we talk about time to recruit, you know, on average across, you know, aggregated across our clients and about 1 million applications. We see still, you know, time to recruit seeing on average around 21 days. Our top performing clients are getting that down to, you know, around 4 days. And what we're seeing in terms of some of that best practice is kind of even from an application stage, removing those barriers and friction, you know, removing that CV, kind of keeping it super short, you know, 3 or 4 questions, up to 7 questions, you know, absolute max at that initial conversation. If you have an assessment in there, keep it below 3 minutes. Try to keep that whole initial application process under 5 or 6 minutes. So we can actually, after that, you start seeing drop-offs. You know, you start layering passwords and account logins. Again, you on average see about a 60% drop-off there as well. Like some of the Indeed data in the US, we're seeing about 70% of applications are completed on a mobile phone, and we're seeing about candidates on average applying for about 15 roles, you know, a week. Okay. So if you think in terms of speed wins and around conversion, what we're seeing is if you can get that candidate applied and actually scheduled for an interview, you know, almost instantly, you know, they stop applying. So, whilst it's front of mind, getting them for an interview, as I said, within, 48 hours. And then, ideally, even in that scenario, from a store or walk-in perspective, again, that can almost be the same day, and an offer almost the same day. So we're seeing that in terms of like that data, we can actually work with clients to kind of get that down to around 4 days. Though I will caveat that, Jen, I think you called this out, some of our environments and organizations are complex and regulated, so that onboarding piece obviously can take longer, dependent on the industry.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to jump into some audience questions. Thank you for those who are sending them through. Click the Q&A box. Jen, Chatty Pinto from Tesla has asked, are you able to share what your assessment centre looks like? Have we lost you? You there, Jen?
Yeah.
Yes, you.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, excellent. So it depends on whether or not it's for our contact centre or for our branch network. But as a general rule of thumb, all of our contact centres have a sort of a lay of the land, a day in the life, a realistic job preview. We try to ensure that we tell the good, the bad and the ugly in those conversations. Really, really important that expectations are managed. And then there is an element of group conversation where candidates get the opportunity to showcase their abilities in a group environment. And then there's breakaways into one-on-one interviews. For our branch network, that's still done with hiring managers. So we will get business to come and physically attend if it's face-to-face, or dial on in if it's done over Teams. And for our contact centres, that would be the talent acquisition partners having those one-on-one interviews.
And you mentioned that you brought the assessment centres back into face-to-face, Jen, based on what candidates were saying?
Yeah. And look, it was a surprise to me from a strategy perspective. We're like, no, we're all online now and everybody just wants to be able to do everything on an online platform. But when we actually stopped and spoke to the candidates and also looked at what the quality of interactions the talent acquisition partners were able to have, where it makes sense, we are moving towards bringing them back face to face. And look, there's pros and cons, right? And you've got to balance them constantly. But one of the biggest pros in that is just that ability to also show our candidates our physical space, right? Like there is, I don't know if you've ever been into a CommBank office before, but it would be the same for you, Alissa, at Optus. You walk in the door and there's just a vibe. So, and you're either really drawn to it or you're like, maybe not for me. So it's also just another touch point for the candidates to have a richer experience.
Yeah, great. Alissa, Paul has asked, with the introduction of Paradox, have you managed to reduce any headcount in the hiring team?
So the answer is yes, but I would layer it over with, demand has also reduced. So I think the team's done a really great job of getting the right people into roles, and therefore we're certainly seeing the demand from the business reduce. And I think just economically, we're starting to see people and businesses reconsider, their organizational structures. So we're no different in that space. I think what's pleasing is through the introduction of the technology that we're putting in place, I feel like the team are really shifting gears to actually doing the work that I think they add most value, and that's really going out and talking to the business, chatting with the candidates, like really getting the engagement going, not actually pushing buttons of steps and statuses in SuccessFactors or other technology. And so yes, we absolutely have seen a reduction in headcount. I wouldn't say it's wholly and solely attributed to the technology, but it's absolutely something that we had put as a forecast in order to get the technology across the line and paid for. But most importantly, as I said, the business value is really creeping up, and the feedback from our stakeholders is just great. So
yeah. Jess Matt has just asked Alissa, thanks for insights. With Paradox conversational AI, when does the application touch point start, since the candidates would initially spend time chatting?
So we have, so we've done a soft launch because we're still working through some nuances on our career site.
Yes.
But what will happen in the next couple of weeks is that CareerMate will live on our career site. So once you land on the optus.com.au careers page, CareerMate will start the interaction with you there. And that's typically when the communication starts. And what I love is just there's some really lovely sort of personalized touches. So it's like, you know, what's your name, first name, last name, but actually what do you want to be called, which I think is really important. And certainly, you know, we have a really diverse group of candidates who are applying, and some with very traditional names. So being able to personalize it like that is great. And then the intent is from the time they sort of look at applying for the role all the way through to onboarding, they'll have a CareerMate experience, and very similar to what you saw in the video, that conversational chat. How can I help you reschedule? How did it go? You know, not just please book in and do this next step.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jenn, Alissa, Ian, thank you for joining us today for this conversation. Thank you to all of those of you who have dialed in online, or perhaps if you're watching this replay, you'll receive an email from ATC with a copy of today's recording, so you can watch it back or share it with your colleagues. We do run these webinars regularly, so head over to the ATC Facebook page, give us a like, make sure that you're following. A big thank you to the team at Paradox for putting on today's webinar. Thank you very much, Ian. Do reach out to Ian. His name's on the screen there. You can find him on LinkedIn as well, and he'll be certainly happy to chat to you about all the wonderful benefits that Paradox has, and certainly it sounds very exciting. Alissa's out there being the test dummy for everybody, so it's great to you know, be able to share these insights. And finally, make sure you are joining us in Sydney in November at Luna Park, 22nd and 23rd of November for the ATC annual conference. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.